WomanUp podcast speaks to and about women and non-binary artists, as well as academics, writers, activists, midwives, carers and more. Those challenging ideas and ideals, questioning assumptions and provoking social change. It's a podcast dedicated to creating a living archive of these people and this work that anyone can access. We find those trying to change current structures founded on bias. Those working intersectionally across gender, race, sexuality, disability, as well as having caring responsibilities. We have conversations about lived experiences, achievements and aspirations, as well as fantastic artwork. In 2023, for Series 5, we received a National Lottery Project grant from Arts Council England to take the podcast on tour. For this episode, we headed down to Brighton to a brilliant project called Quiet Down There, which runs as a laundrette and socially engaged art project. Enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to the WomanUp podcast on tour. I'm Susan Merrick, your host, and we have in the room Amy Dignam, co-producer, and we also have Lucy Jeffries, who is director of Quiet Down There, which is where we're recording today in Brighton. And we have joined with us Annie Wilby, also known as AFLO, and we have Alinah Azadeh. I would like to start with Lucy. If you could let me know, please, how Quiet Down There started and a little bit more about yourself, please.
Sure. So I set up Quiet Down There in 2016 with two other colleagues that had been working in the arts for, I guess we'd all been working in like socially engaged arts for about 15 years, and we, all three of us, saw an opportunity for an organisation that could specialise in the socially engaged element and work across the different art forms, because we'd all noticed that lots of organisations had their own art-specific engagement people, but there wasn't somebody that was kind of taking a bit of a broader view. So we got a grant from Arts Council to set up Quiet Down There, which we did for 6 months, and I've been the director ever since. So they have come and go, the two co-founders. Actually, one of them is currently the chair of trustees. But yeah, so we've been going for 8 years now. And so we started off as a community interest company. We've always been based in Brighton, but we work all over. And initially, we were just really interested in developing kind of high quality pathways, really, from existing cultural provision and people that just weren't benefiting from that for whatever reason. So that's where we started. We did quite a lot of projects. Some of them that we raised money for, we were asked to do projects by lots of different organisations as well. We did a commission for Brighton Festival really early on with a theatre company in Belgium, which was amazing. We did a show at the Bevy, which is the first community pub on a council estate in the UK, which is in Brighton. And early on we did the project with Alinah, which was called Shopkeepers of the World, which was artists in residence in charity shops. And that was in Bexhill and in Hastings. And that was great, with the Delaware War Pavilion. And then, so we were gaining momentum, and we were kind of creating connections, doing quite a lot of work in different places in the UK. And then, COVID hit, and we really had to think about sort of how we were working, just like everybody else did. And actually for us it was a really great opportunity to focus really, really locally, because we're based in the market that's nearly 100 years old.
Yeah, I wanted to describe where we were actually, because we're in a fruit and veg market in Brighton, in this large, we're on a mezzanine. The room that we're in now is on a mezzanine overlooking this large open space, which is a market. So how come you came to be here?
Yeah, so I've actually worked on London Road, which is this main road here. So I've worked on London Road for about 20 years in my previous roles in arts development for different organisations. So I've always loved London Road. It's really, really local, so no tourists ever come here, even though it's really close to the station, because it's at the back of the station. No one ever comes out of Brighton Station and goes back everyone goes to the beach, to the lanes.
I've never thought of it like that. You're so right.
Yeah,
That's why
it's literally like
here.
a 7-minute walk to the station, but no tourism ever comes in. No tourists come here, but that's fine. It's really this market in particular. So it was set up by Harry and Harriet Cowley, which is a lovely link to our laundrette project's called Harriet's Press, after Harriet Cowley, and we can talk a bit more about Harriet later on. But yeah, so the market was set up because essentially between the wars there was no affordable fresh food, so for the families that had less money, the quality of food available was really poor. So Harry and Harriet went out to the local farms and they got the barrow boys in, and they would just literally come with their wheelbarrows and sell fresh food to families. But it was all done in quite a sort of vigilante style, and the council tried to shut them down. And there was this big thing called the Battle of Baker Street, where Harry Cowley made this amazing speech. And then they put, I think it's called a covenant in the, so basically now there has to be a market on this site forever and ever, amen. So this market started as an open market, so it wasn't covered, properly started in 1926. So the market's just coming up to its 100th year anniversary.
Amazing.
Wow.
And it's a brilliant area to work in. It's really creative. There's loads of grassroots organising here. We're really well networked with other organisations, but it's also, so it's in the top 20% of multiple deprivation in England. So essentially that means that the people that live here are kind of 80% more likely to suffer from like multiple deprivations. So that might be economic, or it can be caring responsibilities, or lots of different factors. So it's a really, it's quite a different side to Brighton than maybe people might think of when they think of Brighton. Yeah, that was definitely one of the things that really drew us here. But the buzz of the market as well, and the different types of people that come in is amazing.
Thank you, great. I'd like to introduce one of the two artists that we have here today. Alinah Azadeh. Alinah is an artist, writer, performer and cultural activist of British Iranian heritage. She uses text, textile, audio and live practices to create poetic narratives that activate spaces, amplifying untold or overlooked stories. As well as art commissions for major museums and galleries over the last 30 years, nationally and internationally, Azadeh has had stories, poetries and articles published, most recently The Beard in Glimpse, a speculative fiction anthology published by People Tree Press, edited by Leonie Ross. Soon to be republished as part of the Best British Short Stories 2023. She's an inaugural writer-in-residence at Seven Sisters Country Park and Sussex Heritage Coast, commissioned by South Downs National Park Authority, and led We See You Now, an amazing decolonial landscape and literature programme, which has now produced We Hear You Now, a new spoken word series on listening points across the landscape until 2028. Both of these projects are funded by Arts Council England. Alinah also presents for broadcast and has a podcast called The Colour of Chalk. She is writing her artist memoir as well. Hi Alinah.
Hello.
Hello. So I had a listen to your one of your episodes of podcast, The Colour of Chalk, this morning. Not only do you have a beautiful voice, which just is so easy to listen to, so I thank you for that. But the project itself is a really unique take on looking at environmentalism and viewpoints of this part of the world. Could you tell us a bit more about how it came to be, please?
The We Hear You Now project.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I have quite a personal connection to the coast. Out down on the chalk cliffs, Seven Sisters, and between Eastbourne and Brighton. My mum's ashes are cast there, and so I feel like the last however many years it is since she died, almost 20 years, I've been going there, and it's become a bit of a fertile creative space for me. And I was there just in 2019, just before the pandemic hit, And I was at Berlin Gap, and I went into the visitor centre there, and I saw this line on the floor of the visitor centre which said 2053. And it wasn't that far back from the edge of the cliff. And in fact, now they've closed that part of the visitor centre. And it just got me thinking about landscape loss and my own loss of my mother. And somehow that sort of triggered this story that I wrote, which was a speculative story and a kind of encounter between a young migrant girl and the cliff itself. And I started writing from the point of the more than human as a way of trying to reach into how I felt about the loss of landscape and climate change and that connection with migration and displacement. So that was where it began, and then I used that story as a provocation, and I sent it to the writers with whom I then developed this community through Writing Our Legacy. In fact, Annie, you came on one of the first stream retreats, didn't you, in COVID? Do you remember? Yeah, I sent that story and asked them to respond and ran some writer retreats. And COVID had struck, so I had this vision of like walking and writing with other writers of global majority heritage and thinking about the kind of our origins, our sense of belonging or unbelonging, arrivals, departures. Brexit had just happened, the fact it had become a border, loss and change, and just very rich mix of themes. And everything shut down, and it came at the point where I was starting this writer residency because the National Park had heard the story and we were in a dialogue with them, and they offered me this sort of post at Seven Sisters, liking the fact that I was going to sort of develop this project as a kind of collective of voices. And what was planned to be a kind of, what I thought would be a performance project, actually, a site-specific performance project out there, turned into a digital recorded story, turned into a digital project, and then eventually, has become this audio series. But that came after 2 years of Arts Council funded walking, writing retreats, developing groups, deepening connections with the other writers, many of whom, around 35 writers that I worked with over the course of 2 years, and many of whom had a lot of commonality with, so experiencing multiple kinds of barriers, not just to sort of accessing that kind of landscape, but in their lives generally. And in fact, the resulting collection, which is of 13 pieces of poetry, story, or new myth, all bar one are older women of colour, so with kind of intersectional barriers. So we write, we write through our own lens about the landscape, but we also write about our own lives and our migration stories and our take on this idea of change and deep time and uncovering histories. There's a lot of histories that are kind of overlooked that you'll find on the shipwrecks and the lighthouse and links to slave wealth and that these kind of overlooked bits of colonial history, Seaford Caribbean soldiers, and there's a lot there that has not been touched. And so in a way, that initial story, which was provocation, has turned into a 3-hour body of work, which is a gently provocative but also beautifully immersive and powerful body of stories, which is not kind of like an archive now because it's there for 5 years. But the idea is that in itself becomes a resource, speaks to younger generations, and is a bit of a welcome and a signal that this is a landscape for them and there are other things they should come and look at and generate their own stories with. So it's a kind of tool as well as being a piece in itself. Do you see what I mean? Yeah.
I imagine that works incredibly well actually with the podcast that you started with that, because from what I can gather, the podcast is speaking to each of the artists that you have worked with, so as well as the piece of work that they've created, the writing or the spoken word, the performance-based work, you then speak to them around that, so you get to dig into where their research came from, what they were reflecting on, which is really a really powerful archive, isn't it?
Yeah, that did originate. So those quite deep conversations that we're walking and talking out in the landscape with, Josephine Hall, Dolani Kudasinghe, Razia Aziz, and then I did one on my own, initially just explaining myself on Berlin Gap Beach, telling my own story. Yeah, that in a way that was kind of set the whole thing up in a way, because I wanted that level of intimacy and engagement with the immediate environment, and that sense of us being part of that landscape, sonically, and in terms of the stories that might emerge from it. I wanted that sense to run through whatever the resulting work was, and our conversations, because they were so rich right from the get-go through the retreats, and the kind of stories that were being told and offered, and also the intrepidation, and for many of the writers that sense of like, I don't know if it's a safe space for me to come out there because I've experienced real racism, or it doesn't feel like comfortable, or I wouldn't go there on my own again because I had a bad experience, or the rural, not for me, or it's not even that far away, say, from Brighton or Eastbourne, where many people are based, but it still felt like crossing a border to go there. And so this idea of being together as walking together, being there together in solidarity, and exploring those quite tender, sensitive issues, and then allowing people's stories to emerge over a period of time, because COVID happened, and so a lot of it was on Zoom initially.
Do you think having those meetings and being able to talk to the artists as well was a bit of a cycle completing, because you'd obviously started the project in a community way, where you were having the workshops and the retreats, you say, and then you had COVID where everything went online and digital, so actually being able to come back to those places in person and have conversations again?
Absolutely, because actually I only met people, a lot of the writers, online because of the whole lockdown thing. So when like a year and a half after we'd been working, I met them in person out the coast. I was like, oh my god, a 3-dimensional version of this was amazing, and I thought they were the same height as me, and I thought they knew each other, then they don't, and there were all these 3D in real life versions of the experience, which was quite emotional actually, coming together. And I did it because I didn't want to be that lone artist in the landscape thing. I don't want to do that pastoral, person alone in the landscape. I had a privilege. I was given this huge cultural privilege of this residency, and I just knew that this idea of decolonising, or as I like to call it, kind of creating equity of voice and access and all those things, needed not to be just for me. And I needed the company. I needed to explore some of these issues around extreme loss, or what does the future look like, or look at these bits of history people are just ignoring, or how did you get to be here? How did I get to be here? Why I feel drawn to this place and yet a bit nervous, and why does it feel so? And then the beauty of that place, the beauty of the Sussex coast, as well, and the rest. And that rest as resistance, coming to rest and write and create together. I wanted that as well, because through COVID it was it was an intense period, wasn't it? Very heightened. So it's been an amazing journey, which I did for myself, of course, as much as wanting to create this kind of collective of voices and stories, and
Thank you. Annie, I'd like to come to you. I'm going to just read your bio. Give me 2 seconds. So, AFLO. The poet is an award-winning Brighton-based spoken word artist, activist and academic who embraces creative expression to disrupt the status quo and inspire social change. AFLO uses poetry as a vehicle to address hard-hitting topics, particularly racism and mental health, primarily speaking from her lived experiences. AFLO has performed at various protests, festivals and events, in addition to offering workshops to encourage others to engage in creative expression as a means of personal as well as a societal healing. AFLO is one of Brighton's Dome's in-house artists for 23-24 and is a significant force directing change in Brighton's creative scenes. AFLO, also known as Annie Wilby, if you don't mind me saying both names.
Yeah, if I'm an artist here though, am I an artist today? Yeah, we'll go with AFLO. Yeah, it's nice to have the different hats, because I think often as an artist you have to do other things as well, in the early days, or maybe forever. But it's nice to have the different hats.
I like that. I watched a piece on YouTube where you were talking about protest and activism, and you were discussing how you called yourself previously an armchair activist, and your kind of progression through the pandemic, actually, what's changed for you, and how your creative practice has really come to a fore through that. Could you chat a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so I've, since being tiny, I've always become incensed by the idea of injustice and not understanding how people can see an injustice and either not recognise it or not address it. It's bamboozled me since as soon as I could be bamboozled. It's been going on since then. I guess through like social media or discussions with people, I've always engaged in these more difficult topics, be that around race or mental health or class or anything political. But yeah, kind of just doing that from my armchair, the comfort of my home, behind a screen with a keyboard, and not asserting my voice outside of that for, I guess, fear of criticism, but also as a mixed race person talking on racial issues, I'm aware of the privilege that I have with being mixed, and colorism is very real. However, like the racism that I experience is real, but I didn't think that I would be the one to say stuff and that I would do a good job of it. I always thought that someone else would do it better, or that if I tried to speak up, that I would say something wrong. But then in 2020, I guess like watching what was going on in the city around me as well as on the news, it was kind of like, I think I could do something to make this better. And so I engaged with the rallies and sharing poetry, encouraging other local Black people to speak and share their stories, so that we have a more like dynamic way of speaking and sharing stories around these really difficult experiences. I think in a time when everyone is doing a lot of talking, it becomes quite difficult to listen. And so how can you offer a different way of listening? And then as lockdowns eased and things started opening up again, I guess some people wanted to follow through on their Black Square promises after George Floyd was murdered. And so I was then given opportunities to take up space or to be included on lineups, because I don't think that absolutely wasn't something that was considered in this city, having Black people on lineups. Or even like, I wasn't being paid for my poetry before COVID hit. I had one paid gig that was actually with Alina's husband. That was my first. Yeah, remember?
Poetry.
Yeah. Your kids were there too. Yeah, it was lovely. And then like a month later, we were inside. But I have to have an awareness that like, if George Floyd wasn't murdered, I wouldn't be doing any of the things that I'm doing. That I definitely wouldn't be invited to sit and chat with you today, because even though I've followed my gut and done what I think I should do, I have to have an awareness of like the political climate around me and what has happened in order to like create space for me, in order for my voice to be heard when I decide to speak up. And so it's so important to stay true to that initial cause and to not lose sight of that. And so I've continued to engage with the city in various ways, in various places, and I feel connected, I feel an impact. I think it's important to think globally and act locally. So change what you can around, think of everything that's going on in the world as much as you can fathom, and then try and direct that change into your surroundings. Because if we all did that, wouldn't the world look like a different place? Yeah.
Wow. You want a little cheer for that?
Well, we're all doing that, aren't we? That's cool. I mean, I love that you're going on tour. So like you're sharing your spreading your seeds.
That's exactly right in terms of how you've got where you are and why it is, and because of the principles you start with, like sharing women's voices, sharing women artists' voices, women and non-binary people, and those that have other responsibilities, those that are not able to either have a full-time art practice or have an art practice that they even dare call an art practice. That's what inspired us to go, okay, we're meeting all these amazing people because they're in similar circumstances to us. Let's hold these voices up, let's hold these experiences up and validate them in a way that we know we can do, because then, like talking about archives, other people can come to it and say, oh, okay, look at all these people that maybe aren't on reading lists, that maybe aren't talked about in art schools, you know, we can dip into them and learn about them and learn about where they are. And yeah, coming on tour has come at an amazing time for us, because we get to now see what's going on in the rest of the country and not just be hidden in a bubble of, you know, who is available to us in the networks we had. So AFLO, did you happen to have anything that you could share with us today? I did mention it.
You want a little poem?
I love a little poem.
You want a little poem? I can do that. I will share one that I wrote called Get the Dirt Under Your Nails, which is about kind of reimagining how we could be if we kind of let go of some gender stereotypes that are forced upon us. And this was written as part of a commission by the Old Market for their Reigning Women series. And you can check them out online. Lots of incredible local Brighton-based female artists. But yeah, this is Get the Dirt Under Your Nails. On this earth, we are taught to tread lightly. With your lips pursed tightly, you should still smile brightly. Step out of the mould and you're told you're unsightly, so sit and bite your tongue, ensure you bite it politely. Some think they're flying free, but still be on string like kite. Brainwashed on the daily so they don't dare to dream at night or fantasize about the times when the feminine divine was not perceived as a threat, needing to be neutralized. For centuries we've believed we needed to be purified, rarely seen as whole but our bodies still utilized, commodified then told it's our fault if and when we're brutalized, and if we don't bear children by default we're scrutinized. So we stunt our own development as some kind of sentiment, trained to clip our wings as an act of benevolence, line up with the regiment, too afraid to experiment, and then before you know it, you create your own impediment. A wise woman once told us why birds in cages sing, longing for freedom, a way to cope when living in a reality that strives to deny you of what you're yearning, a life beyond the bars, my dear, of that you are deserving. So break the doors off its hinges and don't repent for your sins. And if you can't open the window, then smash through the ceiling. You've got to get outside to find what resides within. Get the grass beneath your toes and get used to that feeling. Get the dirt under your nails, girl. Plow into the sediment. Dig up shrinking violets and unearth your excellence. Remember a time you weren't afraid of the elements. Stop treading like a mouse and roll with the elephants. Head to the sky, don't be afraid to share your dreams. Burst rain clouds with your crown, rain down alongside other queens. You're not like other women's, not the compliment it seems, leaving a bad taste in the mouth and reeking of misogyny. So bite the apple, Eve. It's sweet and juicy, tastes like decadence. This garden is for us. It's our duty to set a precedence for future generations marginalized for their gender. To take no shit, take up space and revel in all the splendor of this gift we have been given. No need to second guess it. Plant your toes in the soil, ground yourself in the present. Unfurl amongst the leaves and let them be a lesson. You may lose parts of yourself, but you'll continue on your quest and you'll grow and you'll blossom, then you'll lose your leaves again. So nourish yourself, care less about who your flourish offends. We should live our lives with seasons, not dictated by the trends, because we're all made out of stars but turn to compost in the end. So no more will I tread lightly upon this earth. I'll reacquaint myself with nature as I get to know my worth. I'll bathe in the moonlight and baptize myself in dirt. This ain't my final form, so be prepared for the rebirth.
Amazing. Thank you. I didn't know I was going to cry. I wasn't prepared.
Aww. I would say sorry for making you cry, but I think it's good to cry, isn't it?
Sorry about coughing, right?
No, you got.
You're allowed to cry and you're allowed to cough.
Yeah, be how you need to be.
Woof. AFLO, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
God, that speaks in so many levels.
Yeah.
Have you always written poetry?
No. No. When I was small, I wanted to be a rapper, but I am a light-skinned woman from Oxfordshire, from David Cameron's constituency, actually. So there were lots of things that made me think that, oh no, that's not for me. Can't use my voice. And then in 2018, I went to a Brighton Fringe show. I saw Travis Alabanza. If you haven't heard of them, would 100% recommend listening to their work and just them speaking. They're a beautiful human being. And I followed their activism, but I hadn't actually listened to their poetry. Poetry was not my thing. If you'd asked me if I liked poetry in 2019, I'd been like, nah, sorry, I'm not coming, I'm not interested, it's not for me. And I went along and I was like, whoa, this can be a bit like rap. There can be rhythm and flow and cadence, and it doesn't have to be whatever I was told poetry was in school, which is very much about the war and very much by men and very short and very like, I'm not like trying to say it's bad, it's just not for me, it's not my flavour. And so then in 2019, as like a New Year's resolution, I'd also started therapy the year before, and so it was kind of reflecting on this idea of like, I haven't been heard and I haven't felt understood, and this like wanting to do things that I hadn't done in my life. I was artistic when I was younger, and then university and trying to keep up and earn a wage and pay the bills can deplete you of that, can deplete you of the space for that. So I said to myself, I will write one poem and perform it one time. And I did that for International Women's Day in 2019, and I just continued from there. I met Leo, Alinah's husband, like a couple of months later, and he very much took me under his wing, as did like many other people in the creative scene, which was beautiful. But what I was noticing was like a real lack of like noticing people like me in Brighton's poetry scene, right? It was quite white, like white pages. And so the comments that people would make about my poetry was also very much about it being about race and how that needed to be heard. And it felt kind of like, even though I wanted to speak about these things, it felt like exposing in a different way, because I didn't necessarily felt understood. It was like, oh, I'm talking and you're hearing it, but I also want to share with more of my own. I remember going to a year later, so in 2020, at the World's End pub, actually, which is opposite the open market pretty much on London Road. A friend had organised another event, and I was on the lineup, as was Pris Nash and Erin James, and Josephine Hall was also there. I'd met her like the week before another poetry event, and suddenly I was like, oh, there's all these black women, femme people in a room, and you're all doing poetry. We must come together. I really want to come together. I want to create a collective. Like, we need to share our voices. And then COVID hit. But then as things started opening up again, I've gradually developed AFLO and the Poets, which has taken many different forms. But we were an ever-evolving collective of black, marginalised, gendered poets based in Brighton, and continuing to take up space and sharing stories and using that as that outlet, you know. I think so many people use poetry or any creative expression as this mode of healing, right? Which is so necessary. And so then to do that collectively and to encourage that collective healing has been so powerful. My whole life has changed, and that's all those changes kind of happened in this period of isolation, apparently.
Yeah.
And I've never been more connected in my entire life.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah, everything has changed since then in my life.
That word is really important there, isn't
Yeah.
it? In fact, in both of your works, and probably why we are all here today, which brings me back to Lucy and Quiet Down There. You know, how did you three all come to work together? What's been the links that's brought you together?
Well, I met Alinah actually when I was working at South Bank Centre.
Oh yeah.
Because you did Bibliomancer's Dream, which I still remember now. It's just an incredible project on the ballroom at South Bank. And I came in to do a maternity cover. Yeah. And I think it was actually just my job to take it down. I wasn't there when you actually set it up. But God, the storage for that thing.
Yes.
I'm joking. It was big, wasn't it? It was anyway, it's beautiful. It was books and writing for children. And so we met then, and then we stayed in touch, but I don't think we worked together then for a few years. And then when we set up Quiet Down There, we did 2 projects, didn't we? We did the one in Hastings, and then we did the Women's Place project as well, which was in Gravesend.
Yeah, the retreat.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that was at the point where had I just done the big craftivist project in Hull.
Yes,
the City
I think
of
it was
Culture.
almost, maybe the Hull thing was just after.
I was just after, yeah. So I was really into this. I think it was all to do with the Women's March, and I was working a lot with textile installation, and then I got very much into craftivist practice as a way of having conversations around rights and injustice and things. And I think we basically set up this. I think it was a day retreat. So it was a day retreat where we used the craftivist practice and some provocations to sort of hold a space for women to come and talk about their issues, and use stitching and sharing as a way of kind of just coming together to kind of a sort of space for solidarity and creativity, and some time out to sort of reflect on things together.
And it was on, so we did it with LV21, which is an art centre that's on a decommissioned lightship. So it's in Gravesend, and they're just in the estuary there. So you've got like the Tilbury docks on the other side, and you've got the Tilbury ferry going back and forth, and they're on this side. And it's, lightships are huge, and this one is red, so you can't miss it.
It's amazing space.
But it's a beautiful, beautiful space, run by an amazing woman called Päivi, who's from Finland. So we worked on that together. And Alina's one of those artists that's always in my mind, as somebody who, commissions artists, and also I'm always thinking about, where the work of Quiet Down There is going, and the impact that we're having, and the kind of things that we want to be doing. I think, your work is always in my mind, and I've kept up with your We Hear You Now project as well. There's a kind of an ongoing relationship, but probably, I don't know, when did you do the Bibliomancer? So that must have been
2010.
So
Bibliomancer's Dream. It ran for 2 years. That's why they stored it. It ran for 2 years because they liked it so much they brought it out again.
That's right. Yeah.
2009 and 2010.
2009.
Yeah.
So we met in 2009.
Part of that literature festival. Yeah.
So quite a while before I set up Quiet Down There, when I was still working full time for organisations. Yeah. And AFLO.
Well, yeah. I guess, do we work together? I guess we kind of do. But
I certainly learn a lot from you.
We have great chats. I come in to use the laundry. I live nearby, and as well as an artist who is earning money from artistry. I'm also a PhD student. I earn money from that as well. But rents are high in Brighton, and I don't have a washing machine in the place where I live currently, and I've never had that before. There's always been space to plumb it in, and I've kind of had the spare resources to do that. We've mentioned Josephine Hall several times.
So Josephine's also someone that we've worked with,
Yes, and one of my best friends. And I've lived with Josie. And I remember meeting up with Josie when she was doing the Quiet Down There work and doing the little zine and stuff. And we'd meet up and chat about it. So she told me about the laundry and was like, well, you should go. And it kind of... At first I felt so anxious about the idea of getting something for free, particularly with laundry. And we've spoken about this a lot, right? The idea that there's literally your pants in there. It's something quite intimate. And so taking them out of the house and putting them I've been in the laundrette on London Road as well. I still go in there sometimes as well, in between. And it's a very different vibe to sitting down, having a cup of tea and making a little crafty thing. I come in every 10 days or sometimes more frequently. We have a chat, we have a cup of tea. And I often do the craft, but sometimes we just want to brainstorm or put the world to rights a little bit, don't we? Yeah.
I can totally imagine us working together. We just haven't yet.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm sure we will.
It'll happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you're keen to help me with a funding application already, aren't you?
Yeah. So that's another service that I do at the laundry, is if somebody is looking to like start a new creative project, or maybe a project that's to do with helping women, non-binary people, I offer like sessions for people to come in, because I set up the CIC and then I converted it into a registered charity, and I've raised all the money. So, but actually, when you're doing those things, it's quite lonely. Like there aren't necessarily lots of people that have done, and they're quite specific experiences. So, So in fact, just yesterday, a woman came in who's just started a gardening project in Shoreham, and we did her laundry, and we just spent an hour and a half going through her CIC registration papers and looking at some funding opportunities.
I feel like I want to describe a little bit more about what we see Quiet Down There as, because you guys know of it and we now know of it, but maybe the listeners are only just getting to grips with the idea of what is this place we're talking about. So there are two spaces here in the fruit market. There is a space that's used as more of an office space, where we are sat recording now, and the next door, and this space above it has Quiet Down There above the door. In the space next door, the other room, is the laundrette. It's called Harriet's Press, which maybe you can talk us through in a minute. And in there is a washing machine and 2 dryers, and we've just been shown it, it's amazing. But it's a space where people locally can come in and use that space to get their laundry done, but also have a space to do whatever else they need, whether that's sit and have a quiet half an hour or a chat, or there might be something craft-based or arts-based going on as well if somebody wants to incorporate that into their time.
And you don't even have to stay either.
They just get the washing machine.
You don't have to stay.
You don't have to stay, but why
Most
wouldn't you?
people do.
I think one time I did go, didn't I? I was like, I've got so much to do tomorrow, and I did feel sad about it, but.
Well, we have a different activity every week. So the creative activity is always available. So the machines and the creative activity, that's just a given. Okay. And we do change it every week, because we do have people that come every week. So we do need to change the creative activity.
Do people sometimes come in to do the creative activity and not have any laundry?
So people ask if they can do that, but really I always feel like, well, you could there's lots of places where you could do that. It's really important for us that the machines get used. You know, we fundraise for the machines, and we are reporting to funders that paid for those machines. So it's really, but what I always say to people is like, bring a jacket that you want to wash and put away for the winter, or bring your oven gloves and all your tea towels. Like bring some, even if you don't have any washing.
A few blankets.
People have brought all sorts. Like somebody brought the dress that they'd worn to Pride, just that one dress, and we washed it. And sometimes we do hand washing, and we can hand wash together. Sometimes people bring stuff, and you can't actually put it in the machines. So we've learnt really well to read the labels. But we've got buckets. And there's options. You know.
So the question that's been bugging in me before we even came here is why laundry? What for you? What has been this drive around laundry?
Yeah, I mean, why not laundry? That's the question, really. I mean, I'm a laundry bore actually, so stop me when you need to. But it's so rich, like it's unbelievable the different places you can take it, and the way you can kind of mine laundry as an experience, like creatively, but then also historically. So if we talk about the kind of, you would imagine that it's mainly women that do laundry. Actually, that's not true from Harriet's Press. We actually have slightly more men that come than women, which is really interesting. We actually have a lot of, men that live outdoors that come and use or men that live in vans. And actually what happens is, what they say is actually that there's a lot of men in the homeless community, and it's quite difficult just to be with women and have a cup of tea. So they really enjoy just coming and having a cup of tea and just kind of being in a different environment with people that they wouldn't necessarily normally encounter. But actually, when you look at the kind of historically, if you look at laundrettes, for example, and actually we're doing a project on this at the moment. So the reason it's called Harriet's Press, Harriet's for Harriet's Cowley, but press is really a reference to the kind of, there's been loads of like underground, anarchic, really interesting grassroots stuff that's happened in the laundrette. So you've got the laundry at the front, and then you've got all the stuff that happens at the back. So
just like EastEnders.
AFLO is always talking about EastEnders.
I love it. Sorry.
When she's in the laundry. Yeah. So like in World War II, so a lot of the laundrettes in East End of London were run by the Jewish community, and there was tons and tons of anti-Nazi propaganda that was printed in the back of. So that's also where the idea of press, and we do zines. So that's where the press comes from. Printed, and then it was just given to people with their laundry. You just slip it in there and give them the laundry back, and that's how stuff got passed around.
And a bit like Orange is the New Black, so according to Orange is the New Black, which is where I get all my prison reference from. That's exactly how things are passed
around. Yeah. And like when smallpox came, it was the women in the laundry that were really kind of managing the smallpox, because a lot of it was travelling through clothes, and so there was a lot of like women that just became very educated about it very quickly, and they're really, a lot of those women that worked in laundrettes are credited with actually making sure that the outbreak didn't kill as many people as it could have done. A lot of suffragette stuff happened in laundrettes because it's actually where women were already. So a lot of women, I think there's a census, I think it's from 1910, and the amount of people that put laundry as their profession it outstrips any other profession. So there was a point where there were no washing machines, and that laundrettes were, but there were laundries. There were like laundries alongside bathhouses, so lots of people worked in those laundries. But a lot of women, if you were at home, you just took the laundry in from all the neighbours, and you did the laundry, and that's how you made money. And a lot of men did that too. And Harry and Harriet Cowley, who started the market, they both worked in the laundry. Actually, there was a laundry called the Sunlight Laundry up in Hanover, and they both worked there. She was famous for her ironing, apparently. She could iron a very good shirt, and he would wash the silks. So there's such an interesting historical element, but also actually, when we did that project that we did with Josephine, so in the first lockdown we commissioned 6 artists, because laundrettes remained open. So the people that worked in the laundrettes were essentially key workers, but they weren't called that, and they weren't given any privileges. So we commissioned artists to safely either go out and talk to people working in laundrettes face to face while they were doing their laundry, or some of them just got on the phone and spoke to local people in the area. Josephine did a residency in 3 different laundrettes actually around here, which was brilliant, and that's her poem actually on the wall. She wrote a poem and she made a zine. But I spoke to it when I was doing a bit of research on behalf of one of the artists. I spoke to a woman somewhere, it's terrible, I can't remember where it was now. I spoke to a lot of people, but like she'd worked in the laundrette her whole life, and her mother had worked in the laundrette her whole life, and her mother's mother had bought the laundrette. Wow. And she was older, she was probably in her late 70s. And the stories that just came tumbling out of her, and she was like, no one's ever asked me about this before. Yeah. No one's ever asked me about what the history of the laundrette. People had asked her about her mum and her grandma. It was quite a small place where everyone knew each other. But I was like, these stories are just completely undocumented, and it is women's history. Yeah. Maybe we get more men in the laundry because maybe for different reasons. That kind of, I think sometimes because it's quite a public thing, but the people that work in the laundry are certainly women. So there's that. Anyway, and there's lots of different things. There's the thing that AFLO was saying about how, you don't take your dirty underwear to the library, do you? And like get it out on the table, but you do in a laundrette, and it changes the dynamic of a space. It changes the intimacy, basically. Like we talk a lot about the accelerated intimacy that comes with either someone doing their own laundry, or sometimes we do laundry for people if they have disabilities and they can't get to the machines. And there's something really interesting that happens. If you put someone's laundry on and then you invite them to come to a table with a creative activity set up, you're sitting down in a different place than if they walked in and you said, oh, come and sit down and do this creative activity, you know, because you've shared this experience, there's this kind of intimacy that's happened. And also, you know, if there any sort of perceived hierarchy has gone, then because you've kind of, you know, call it a compassionate intervention, you know, you've done that thing, you've said, made them a cup of tea, let's sit down. Somebody who doesn't normally do any creative work, they will sit down and they will engage, and, you know, sometimes only for 5 minutes, or, you know, they'll talk to you a bit more each time, or so there's something really interesting that laundry brings to a space that other things don't. And there's lots of other things as well, but I won't go on.
There is that vulnerability as well, right? So you I'm just kind of reflecting on it now, but yeah, that vulnerability around like the pants and your dirty smalls and whatever going in there, that when you sit down to do this creative activity, which are always so mindful, like Saj puts a lot of thought into
Saj is our
ensuring
artist in residence who programs all the activities. Yeah,
she does such a good job of ensuring like variety, but also like accessibility, so it can be something that you can finish within the time usually, and it doesn't take all the cognitive effort that it might do to like maybe create a piece of art that you might think. So you're in this more reflective, mindful mode, whilst also in this more vulnerable space. And so then the things that you talk about and share are often like quite vulnerable, right? Or I've overlapped with several other people who use the laundry, and the conversations that we even have, even though we're total strangers, but we've met in this place that feels safe, that then the things that I might share with them or that they share with me, even though I'm on my way out, is so special and intimate that you don't get around like London Road, for example, or anywhere else. It's this little bubble, kind of another bubble you can hop into and feel a sense of like,
It's important, isn't it?
Interesting, that just trying to think about relationship. This idea of relational spaces that happen over a long period of time and people return to. So just thinking about the project I've been doing, it's like, it takes time, you know, and it's the slowness.
I love that.
And the repeat.
Yeah, I've always wanted to have a project, a creative project that just had an open door.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like you're here, and actually one of the barriers to you know, doing something creative regularly for people is that, you know, you've got to schedule it in and you've got so much to do, and is it on the right day, and I can't do it that day. Whereas if you say we're here, the door's open 4 days a week, and guess what, you know, saying I can't come because I've got too much laundry to do, you know, that doesn't wash. You can bring it with you. So and it is the regularity with which we see people. So we see people, some people we've seen every week for like 9-10 months.
Wow.
Some people like Annie AFLO, you know, every 10 days. Some people people tend to come, you know, when they don't have access to laundry, affordable laundry, and often that happens at a time in their life when other things can be quite tricky as well. So we get a lot of people that come very regularly for sort of 6 weeks, and then something might change in their lives, and then we don't see them for a little while, or then they pop in for a cup of tea and they just, you know, just to say hi. So we're often sort of seeing people quite intensively for short periods of time, but then we have quite a lot of regulars, so maybe like 15-20 regulars who come weekly or bi-weekly.
Alinah, you seem to have a lot of experience in your work leading up to the project you've just done in terms of social engagement and, or at least collective and participatory practice. Is that, you know, are these longer term projects something that you always do, or have you done it over shorter term, longer term? Do you have preferences?
I have to say that historically, because the projects that I did as a visual artist, often with installation projects and public spaces, were linked to commissions with generally quite short time frames, and they were out of this area. So I was often going. A lot of my work seemed to happen in London or up north, or not in the place that I live in. Prior to the pandemic, when everything changed. It was interesting because there wasn't often not the time and space to develop those longer term relationships and work in the way that I realise is actually more natural to me. So it's like here, and the remit would come from an institution. So we want you to, we'll commission this installation, it won't happen for this festival, or within 3 months, the outcome is this, these are the communities we want you to work with, da, da, da. Residencies are a bit different, but still, often there would be a sort of certain structure or an expectation. Very different from this, where I got some R&D Arts Council funding. I was wandering around, knew I had some themes I was interested in, wanted to write more about my mother and the landscape, and then it evolved. And then because of COVID, and because I thought, I can't go anywhere, and I would love to develop something that was just like where I live, because I often felt I was always being taken off, going off, and then the relationship would stop with, the communities or the venue, and then it wouldn't be, because it was often under it was often under the kind of banner of, with the learning and participation, not curatorial with institutions, it wouldn't have a legacy. My own voice within the project was not what they were interested in. It was about the fulfillment of the inclusion or participatory or diversity agendas. And although that's completely what I believe in, I didn't find that this relational thing between myself and the groups that I was drawn to work with, was given the time or space, or there's a kind of hierarchy of value within some of those kind of projects. And so this has been quite amazing, because I didn't plan for it to be 3 years long. I didn't know what was going to happen, and so because of all the delays, and because of COVID, and because of thinking, and because of the interest from the park, who said, well, we think quite long term. This isn't just about a project for us. This is about what can happen. How could this be a model for working in other ways other people can work with? We'd like to think in the longer term. And also, what do you think should happen? How do you think this project should go? As in handing me some agency and going, it's your project, we're partners in it. But so I worked with this brilliant person called Anushka Rawdon, who's the cultural heritage lead at the National Park. And that was her approach. And she, and the park has backed that, and that's quite unusual. And what do you need? What do you no one's always asked me that. They're just like, here we are, and different. I mean, not actually. I have to say, with Quiet Down There, that was very relational and collaborative. What can we offer to these women, and how? And so you're actually one of the organisations that did that, because we were in a conversation, that ongoing sense of a dialogue and a conversation, and. Yeah, it's not transactional, it's relational. It really works for me. I realise as I get older, as I become older, slow and, within walking or busing reach, and feeling like I can plant myself here. It's permacultural. It's a permacultural approach to making art that I think I've been a bit uprooted so many times, and I was getting tired. As well.
Permaculture, that's such a good
what is
phrase.
here that I can help nurture and grow? And I realised, God, there are all these amazing writers who I have lots in common with. Writing a legacy was key to that. It's like, here they are, and like, oh my goodness me, I feel like I'm in kinship with people, and it's not me leading a project, although of course I brought lots to it, but it's like I can evolve as an artist and writer myself alongside, because many of the writers are much more as writers, because I'm artists who've come into writing, they're much more experienced than me, and so I've learned, it's about that co-learning as well. It's a very different model, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to, I want to keep doing it like that. How do I keep working like that?
Is that quite similar for you then, AFLO, in terms of the collective that you set up? But I know you're also, check my notes to get this right. I know that you are also involved in or helped set up Barco. So do you want
both?
Yeah.
Okay.
So can you tell us what that is and about that, and kind of those collaborations? Obviously, one's more activism, one's more artistic.
Well, artivism, innit? You can't take the art out of activism, and you can't take the activism out of art. Well, I don't think you should anyway. I think that they're very much intertwined. So Barco is Brighton's Black anti-racism community organisation, and I co-founded this alongside Bud Johnston, Vanessa Crawford and Bobby Brown in the summer of 2020 in response to George Floyd's murder, but also not only Brighton and Hove City Council's response, but this global response we were seeing as like, oh, George Floyd has been murdered. We hear you, BLM. I'm doing the, what are these, air quotes? Yeah. And so our response is BAME, again, air quotes, BAME initiatives, black and minoritized ethnic, rather than like, well, I don't think George Floyd was BAME, I think he was black. And actually, if you look at what BAME means, that just means everyone but white British. So Irish, Polish, European also, which is important. It's an important statistic to have. But if in response to anti-black racism, you're going to dilute the issue, and you say, well, there's all this funding, but it won't be towards black causes, well, I think that you're missing a beat. And so we came together. Initially, we were trying to do all the things, like take on the council, take on the police, work with all these organisations for free. Like, our time isn't paid, yet you're sitting in meetings with people who are being paid. And quickly, we were realising that we didn't have the energy to give back to the community and to create space for the community that we wanted to. And so we've kind of switched up our focus in that our main focus is creating more spaces and opportunities for black people in and around and with connections to Brighton to meet one another and share in black joy. So we have Dominoes and Vinyls events, we have black networking events. Annually, we have our Barco Bash, which is coming up very soon, which is a day, like a celebration of black culture in our city. So this, from 10 till 10, there will be black artists on a stage in the centre of town. There will be black food, there will be black vendors selling things that are all local, and just proving that, like, we exist, we are here, because there's this narrative that in Brighton and Sussex that, like, somehow we don't exist. And so, yeah, I think a lot of what I do is kind of focused on offering people, trying to find more space and trying to find audible space also, wanting people's voices to be heard, but also empowering people to use their voice, and that the way in which you choose to use your voice is enough. Often in workshops, it's usually adults, actually. Kids don't have so much of a problem with this, but adults will be like, oh, but wait, we've started the task, but how long does it need to be? Does it need to rhyme? Is it supposed to say this? What are the rules? How does it need to be? And it's like, it's how you want it to be. I know that that's really scary, but you can do it. And this idea that actually, if we can't think creatively enough to create something for ourselves, then how on earth are we going to challenge these wider structures and think creatively to come up with another way, when actually, if we're this stifled, and that in and of itself is a result of colonialism, right? What art is considered good, what art means that that's a job and that it isn't a job. What allows you to be called an artist? Well, you haven't had a certain level of experience or qualification. How do you know how to do this? I remember the first time I was asked to run a workshop, which was actually by Amy from Writing Our Legacy, Sussex-based organisation for writers of colour. And I remember saying to her, I haven't done that before. Like, I don't know what a sonnet is. And I still don't tell me. It's part of my thing. Yeah, no. But the thing is you don't have to know what a sonnet is to call yourself a poet, you know? Like, what I did earlier was a poem. I don't know the rules of poetry. And I think if we apply that, if we encourage everyone to apply that in whatever creative form they feel most comfortable with, that is what will lead us towards an effective and equitable revolution. Yeah. Fight the power with art.
Of forms as well. A blending of forms.
Yes.
Like, I'm not sure if the work that I write is poetry or prose. Sometimes it's a mixture of both, and does that really matter? And, you know.
I mean, I'm going to say it's all poetry. I'm going to say that your prose is poetry and yeah, everything's poetry. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah, working collectively, it's to empower everybody. Like, the black community in Brighton, particularly since COVID, has become so interconnected, and everybody does something. It's not a side hustle, it's a creative outlet. I don't know anyone who doesn't do something. And so it's about glorifying that, giving it the space. I love to refer back to the idea of, like, in the word amateur. The original meaning is to do something for the love of it. It's not to be like, you're basic at it, you're not good enough at it. I'm just an amateur. Like, wow, you do something because you love it. Wow, that is that is incredible in this capitalist society that we are living in, that you continue to do something because you love it. Wow. If we nourish that, we'll have a more Brighton-y Brighton, I think.
That's really relevant as well, I think, to our work, because the nature of the laundry is that we tend to work 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. And actually, we talk a lot about like supporting people in the formation of a creative identity, because that's what a lot of people don't have. So they are creative. When we first started the laundry, we asked everybody that came in 2 questions. We asked them, who did the laundry when you were growing up? Because it's a beautiful, expansive question. And then the other question we asked them is, do you consider yourself to be a creative person? And so many people said no, but when I cook my dinner, I put everything in these little bowls, and they're all I colour code everything, and then I do this and I do that. But when I'm in my garden, I do this and I do this, and I make all these. And we were like, okay, so that is creative, obviously. I think everybody has that side of them. It just comes out in different ways. So I guess there's a bit of challenging that idea about what it is to be creative. But the one of the joys of doing the very, very the one-to-one work or the small group work is that, and doing it with the same people over a long time, is that you can really, really start to do that in a really meaningful way, and in a way that actually people keep it. It's not like I feel like that when I'm in this room and then I leave and I'm not, and you can see that begins to develop. And we have these, every year we do these this sounds really weird, but these sort of like creative aims, basically, that that X amount of people will X amount of people will try something new. That's the sort of the lowest tier. And then, from this last year, we've had some people that have come in, and then they've had a bit of work that they've made with us exhibited in an exhibition with another organisation, or one person was commissioned by another organisation through contacts, through a network that we put them in touch with. So we have these kind of levels of aims for not for specific people, but for us, because we can see the power of, and it is a privilege to work with people in such small groups, because I think before we'd always done workshops, like 10 people in a workshop, we're going to do 3 sessions, or big events, let's get 1,000 people in the market. And I do enjoy that stuff, but it's really different.
I think people behave differently in different contexts, don't they? I think about being outdoors as well, what that does to people's bodies and neurologically as well. And moving, if people are able to walk, that just completely informs your creativity. People's writing creativity in a completely different way. And that's been quite significant for me as well. Just encouraging people to sort of be and write or create outdoors. As a whole other kind of space, which, when I talk to Anushka at the park, it's like she used to work in museums, and she sees that as a museum. It is a form of a museum space, in fact, because actually, and it is, is an archive. It is a disappearing form of, a place where heritage is, has to be restoried. Because there are particular stories about being in the landscape, or English rural history, the bucolic rural, and so how do you restore that? And so you have to kind of spend time in it and in relation to it, and that's been really interesting. And you have to make space, and you have to not feel like some of the people that I worked with initially, a bit like me, because I'm like, well, I'm a visual artist, but I kind of write. And I'm like, well, I'm also a writer now. I can say that, but we're like, well, I'm not sure if I'm a writer. I'm not sure if It's like, you've written this amazing. But you're a writer. What are you talking about? But that took a while, because it's the sort of, I haven't got an MA in English writing, or I haven't published a book, or it's like, I don't care about that. It's like you're producing really profound reflections and beautiful poetry, and and it's like, and this is so relevant to this exploration of the landscape, and this reframing of it as ours as well. That I don't care about that, and that's been part of it as well. It's just that shift.
That's decolonial.
Yes.
Like, why on earth do you need a master's to be able to write creatively? I'm not trying to belittle.
No.
A master's
I'd love to do an MA.
but it shouldn't stop you. I think it would be a wonderfully enriching experience.
Yeah.
I totally back further education. I'm in it myself. And postgraduate education, absolutely. Yeah. However, that it shouldn't be a limitation in having a go or having your work considered. That's what is a legacy of colonialism, is this continued inaccessibility.
And needed to be legitimised by institutions in a certain way.
And in a way, sometimes, sorry, I'm going a little bit off piece now, that like,
We've got a little bit of time.
you know, just really quickly, like the whole like push towards participation, which is actually, it's dropping off now. So strangely, anyway, there was that moment where everybody was wanting to do that. In a way, it feels like that's a way of sustaining the like exclusivity of what's happening at the top.
Yeah,
you know, it's
yeah,
like,
that's right.
Actually, we're going to push that bit because it really helps us keep this bit untouched.
That's right.
And that to me just, it's just
The borders,
feels
the
incredibly
border
wrong.
there.
Burns
Yeah.
out all the artists who are doing the participation
That's
work.
right.
And,
that's what happened.
and they're often women as well.
That happened to me, and
Yeah.
then I think writing helped me because I then found my own voice. Well, do you want me to read it, please?
I would love to.
There,
Yes, please.
And then I thought they're not mutually exclusive.
No, they're not. No.
You know, you find your voice, you make your work, and then that also creates relationships that then enables other people to only make space. And it's not. That's why I slightly exited the kind of museums, galleries, art scene, because I was just a bit like, I'm being categorised in something I don't like, and actually it's quite liberating to be outside with a pen, dematerialised practice, and there you go. And digital as well, using the digital platforms and all that. It's quite liberating, isn't it? Just to take space in a different way.
And that's what we need. We need artists that are going to blur those boundaries
Blur
and
the
travel
boundaries.
across them.
Yeah.
Because that's a role model, for other artists. And there are so many artists that feel the same way.
Yeah.
It would be great for us to finish on a piece of writing by Alinah. Just before that, could you each give us maybe a social media tag where people can find you? We don't normally do this, but it feels like an appropriate time to say just do you want to share for listeners where they can find your work?
So I'm AFLO the Poet, and you can find me online in most places at AFLO.thepoet. Yeah. Easy squeezy.
I'm Alinah Azadeh, ALINAH and I'm on Instagram and all those things. And you can find the project at thesevensisters.org.uk/we-here-you-now. If you want to listen to these stories, or you can pick up a map and a guide. Well, you can go online, but as well. You can find me on Vimeo and a lot of my work on my website as well, which is easily findable with that name.
And we're Quiet Down There, so we're at Quiet Down There on Instagram and on Twitter, I believe. And if you want to join our mailing list, that's the best way to find out what we're doing, and you can just go to our website, which is quietdownthere.co.uk, and you can join the mailing list there.
Oh yeah, Linktree as well. Linktree's really good for all renewals of events and things that we're doing. Linktree with my name, Alinah Azadeh. Linktree's great, isn't it? It's like a little kind of mini archive. Very handy, I think. Archiving. Keeping it alive. Yeah. Okay, shall I read this? So this is a short extract from this story that was the first story that I wrote that generated the whole project and came out of me on the cliff. And so it's a speculative eco-fiction story. So this is taken from the middle of the story, and you can go online to hear the rest of it. And then it's called We Hear You Now, prologue. And then one late spring afternoon, a lone traveller to Havenbrow lay down to rest. And Havenbrow is the cliff, by the way, where you can now find the story. It's the beginning of the Seven Sisters. Settling far back enough from the cliff edge to safely take in the panorama of ocean, chalk and sky. The traveller, a girl, had walked for several hours and taken a new route that day, determined to discover a part of the coast that was unknown to her as yet. Close to falling into sleep, with her long jet-black hair let loose on the grass, walking boots encrusted with mud, and the rosy afterglow of sunbeams on her olive skin, she drew a sharp breath in and sat up. No, it couldn't be. She looked around to see if anyone was approaching. She was definitely alone. And then it happened again. The echo of voices emanating from the ground below. A mixture of fear, disbelief, and excitement surged through her body as she strained her ears for greater clarity. The girl's right ear became a tender, curious funnel for the voices and sounds rising through the chalk and flint channels, and how clear they were seemed to depend on where exactly she lay and how hard she listened. At certain points, she detected 5 or 6 distinct voices bubbling up towards her. Elsewhere, where the chalk was the most exposed, came a few hundred more cacophonous and intense voices in a whole spectrum of languages, merging at times with the wave song at low tide below. Some of them spoke, sang, and lamented in her mother tongue, and some in the tongue she'd learned growing up here. The voices told stories of journeys to this island, of arrivals, departures, loss, longing, and reunion. The girl was sure she detected birdsong among them, birdsong which had long disappeared from these shores, and the unearthly, amplified sounds of other animal and insect life, but she couldn't be sure. The girl lay there for hours through sunset and darkness, transfixed. Her initial fears transformed into fascination and a growing sense of kinship as she listened to the chalk. She didn't know if what she was hearing had been there all along, dormant, or if it had suddenly begun to happen like a switch being flicked on by her presence. In the years following the great pandemics, as the waves of grief at the loss of loved ones fostered the breaking of many hearts and the softening of others, the cliffs sensed the increased human need for connection with this coastal land and what lay beyond. And, knowing this girl was someone who had learned to listen deeply, it had chosen her first. There we go. Excellent.
You've been listening to the WomanUp podcast. To find more of our episodes, subscribe via any of the usual podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and more. For captioned episodes, please visit the WomanUp YouTube channel. And for news and updates, follow us on Instagram at woman.up.podcast.